My name is Claire, and I'm 45. A widow. The word used to land like glass underfoot, sharp, cold, but now it slips off my tongue like any other label. It's been 6 months since my husband, David, passed away. It was sudden one moment. He was chuckling at some rerun on the couch, his fingers lightly tapping my leg. The next, I was shouting his name in the dark, heart pounding as if noise could bring him back. Now the house is too still. My son, Ryan, is away at college, second year studying computer engineering up in Bellingham, just a couple hours north. He checks in every few days, usually with questions like how to make rice that isn't soggy. Sometimes I think he just wants to hear me talk, even if he acts like I'm the one who needs the check-in. He's coming home next week for summer break. I should be excited. And I am, in that way that makes you clean things twice and triple-check the grocery list. But there's also this ache under my ribs, a tension I don't have a name for. Because here's what no one tells you. Grief doesn't just take your person. It takes the rhythm of your days, the invisible thread that tethered everything together. David and I shared 2 decades of habit. Laughter echoing through late nights, sleepy greetings in the morning, fingers brushing over mugs of coffee. And now, nothing. I make coffee for one. I go to bed with silence. And even though I still pull the covers up like I used to, the shape beside me never fills. Still, my body remembers what warmth feels like. Craves it even. Not anyone specific, just that subtle hum of being seen, touched, wanted. There's a small pink item I keep tucked in my nightstand. Not something I ever thought I'd rely on, but it's quiet, simple. A flicker of comfort when the nights grow too long. But even that feels hollow, like I'm pretending to feel something I can only recall. It doesn't laugh at my jokes. It doesn't trace my name with its voice. Still, it's proof, however artificial, that I'm still here. I wonder sometimes, should I feel this way? Shouldn't I still be deep in mourning? But sorrow doesn't always silence the senses. Sometimes, it sharpens them. Last night, I sat on the edge of my bed. The drawer was still slightly open. I hadn't bothered with the lamp, just sat there, the ceiling fan humming quietly above me. I thought of Ryan, how he used to race down the stairs in those goofy pajama pants, asking what was for breakfast before I'd even pour my coffee. He hasn't been home since Christmas. Even then, the visit felt like an afterthought. A blur of laundry, reheated leftovers, and reminders that finals were coming. When he left, his backpack slung casually over one shoulder, it hit me. He's not a boy anymore. I wonder if he still sings in the shower. The closer it gets to his return, the more I find myself preparing. Not just the linens or his favorite snacks, but myself. I've started wearing a bit of perfume again. I tell myself it's just to feel more like me, but if I'm being honest, it's more than that. There's a tension in the air lately, one I can't place. Like static before a summer storm. Sometimes, I pass the mirror in the hallway and catch my own reflection. Older, yes, the faint lines near my eyes softer in the morning light. But it's not the wrinkles that give me pause. It's the expression, something unfamiliar in my own gaze. Longing, maybe. And it unsettles me. Because what I crave, it's not a stranger. It's familiarity. Presence. Someone who's known me without performance. Someone who trusted me with everything once, and now walks back through my front door, shaped by time. Ryan.
No.
That's not right. And yet, the thought circles back like a tide that doesn't need permission to rise. Tomorrow, I'll wash the sheets in his room. I'll make lemon muffins, his favorite, the ones I haven't baked since he last left. And when he arrives, I'll hold him like a mother does, tight, certain. I'll smile, I'll ask about his classes, and I'll pretend that everything inside me is steady. The morning of his return, I woke too early. The sun hadn't even crested behind the trees outside my kitchen window. Still, I found myself downstairs, barefoot on the tile, the coffee pot sputtering to life. I pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet, habit more than need. The air smelled like lemon and vanilla. The counter held the evidence, flour dusted across the wood, bowls stacked in the sink. For a moment I looked out at the driveway. Part of me half expected to see David there, returning from the hardware store with that lopsided grin. But it wasn't his car I watched for. At noon, Ryan arrived. He stepped out of the cab, taller than I remembered, his dark hair tousled, his shoulders broader beneath a fitted shirt. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. Not from grief. From recognition. He had once sat on this floor eating blueberries with sticky fingers. Now he stood with confidence, carrying his own bags. When I opened the door, he grinned. "Hey, Mom." His voice was deeper, but the warmth was still there. I smiled, trying to steady the storm rising behind my ribs. "You look good," he said, arms wrapping around me. "Different but good." "Different?" I asked. He pulled back slightly.
"Yeah."
"Lighter, I guess. Kind of glowing." I laughed. But inside, something trembled. Maybe it was the scent of the perfume or just the sheer rush of seeing him again, but I hugged him tighter than I meant to. "You hungry?" I asked, stepping back with a smile that barely masked the tremble beneath. "I made your favorite lemon muffins." He laughed, warm and familiar. "You didn't have to go all out, Mom." But I had. I needed something to pour the restless energy into, something to distract from the pacing thoughts that had followed me all week like shadows. We sat at the kitchen table, and little by little, the months between us faded like dust in sunlight. He devoured the muffins, teased me about how I still folded napkins like I was prepping for a bed and breakfast, and shared stories about his new roommate, a fellow engineering major who apparently never did dishes, but could rebuild a CPU blindfolded. "Sounds like you're managing," I said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Barely. I miss this place. Missed you." His gaze found mine, and for a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Familiar, gentle, but deeper somehow. Like he was trying to read a page he'd already memorized. Later, he brought his bags upstairs, and I followed quietly, hovering near the doorway as he unpacked into the room that still held echoes of childhood. Posters lined the walls, their edges curling slightly. The bookshelf tilted as always, crowded with old paperbacks, forgotten souvenirs, and a snow globe from a trip we never quite remembered taking. "You didn't change anything," he said, tracing his fingers along the edge of his desk. "I couldn't," I admitted. It felt too final. He gave me that same thoughtful look again. "It still feels like home." I nodded, then forced myself to turn and leave before my voice betrayed more than I intended. That night, I sat in bed. The drawer beside me stood ajar, untouched. Not because I didn't think of it, but because something else took up space in my mind. The sound of water in the hallway bathroom, the scent of soap, the faint warmth in the air he left behind when he brushed past me earlier. And that moment at dinner, our hands reaching for the salt at the same time. Just an instant. Fleeting. But it stayed with me. It was small. It was everything. I turned off the lamp and lay back into the hush. Sleep came late. At some point, I heard a soft creak just beyond my door. My breath caught. I didn't move. But I didn't close the drawer either. The next morning felt altered. Not colder. Not warmer. Just charged. As though the house itself had been nudged awake. Ryan was already in the kitchen when I came down. His hair damp from the shower, t-shirt clinging faintly to his shoulders, pajama pants hanging low at his hips. He was making eggs, whistling softly. "You're up early," I said, trying to sound more casual than I felt. "Jet lag," he replied, flashing a smile. College version. I poured my coffee slowly, focusing on the warmth in my hands, not the man he was becoming right in front of me. His every movement was easy now, natural. Without a word, he handed me a plate.
Just like his dad used to.
Our fingers touched briefly. He didn't pull away. "Thanks," I said quietly. We ate in companionable silence, the kind that only grows between people who've shared a lifetime of breakfasts and quiet conversations. He talked about a possible internship, maybe a weekend trip with friends. I nodded, asked questions. But part of me wasn't entirely present, because part of me kept circling back to the night before, to that creak on the floorboard, that moment of pause. Had he been outside my room? I shook the thought away. Scolded myself. He's just my son. My funny, compassionate, endlessly curious son. Later, we took a walk. The trail behind the house was still soft with spring, tree branches arching overhead like quiet guardians. He walked beside me, hands in his jacket pockets, a slow smile tugging at his lips. I miss this, he said. I did too. He hesitated. Things just felt different after Dad. Like everything shifted a little. I glanced at him. They did. I worried about you, he said softly. Still do. I tried to smile, but it faltered. I'm okay, love. Just learning how to breathe in the quiet. He stopped walking. You've been holding everything up for me, for this place, for yourself. The breeze moved through the leaves above us. I looked away. But who's holding you? He asked. The question settled in my chest like a stone. I didn't answer. He took my hand gently. I let him. That evening, we watched an old movie together. Something light, something familiar. But tonight something had stirred. Something raw and buried, and unmistakably alive. I bit my lip restless. The sheets clung to my skin like humidity. My thighs pressed together without thinking. I turned my head toward the nightstand. A drawer called to me. Slowly, I sat up, the blankets falling around my hips. The room was silent except for the quiet tick of the wall clock and the soft rustling of the trees outside. I reached for the drawer, my fingers trembling. Not from fear, but from a need that had grown unbearable. Opened it. There it was, nestled beside a half-finished journal and an old lavender satch. My pink toy, my secret, my comfort. I held it in my palm, feeling its familiar shape, the soft hum of memory running through my fingers. I lay back against the pillows, eyes closed, breath shallow. I let it happen slowly. The way you sip something strong, something you know you shouldn't but can't resist. And then just as the heat began to build, just as the volcano inside me was breaking through the surface, the door creaked open, froze. The toy slipped from my hand and rolled quietly into the sheets. I couldn't move. My chest tightened as my gaze darted to the doorway. Michael stood there, framed by the soft hallway light. His voice was a whisper, unsure. Mom. I yanked the blankets over myself in a rush, heart hammering. I didn't know you were still awake, he said, his eyes wide, face unreadable in the low light. I couldn't sleep, I stammered, my voice raw, breath catching. He didn't move. He stood there, eyes locked with mine, and I knew he saw, or at least he sensed. The silence between us throbbed. Then he stepped inside. Just 2 paces, enough to cross the line. I couldn't sleep either, he said, his voice lower now. I kept thinking about you. My throat dried. I pulled the blanket tighter, but it didn't matter. Everything had already been seen. Not just the drawer or the toy or the heat in my cheeks, but the ache in my eyes, the hunger. I sat up trying to find words, trying to breathe. Michael, I whispered. He came closer, lowly, carefully, as if he were approaching something fragile but burning. I know this is confusing, he said, his voice trembling. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I couldn't stop thinking about the way you looked tonight. The way you smiled. I swallowed hard. My hands clutched the fabric of the blanket like a lifeline. His eyes dropped just for a moment to the edge of the sheet where the faint shape of the toy was hidden beneath. And then he looked back at me. You don't have to be alone, Mom, he said. It was the gentlest thing I'd ever heard. I didn't speak because I couldn't. Not yet. Not while my entire body was still on fire. The drawer is still slightly open. The flushed heat rising in my cheeks. The way my chest rose and fell in short, unsteady breaths. Michael didn't move closer.
Not yet.
But his presence was everywhere, heavy in the room like a storm rolling across the ocean. Mom, he said again, softer now. His voice cracked a little on the word, like he didn't quite trust it anymore. Like he wasn't sure what it meant tonight. I wasn't trying to interrupt, he said, his gaze flickering as if he were fighting 1,000 things behind his eyes. But I heard something. I thought you needed someone. I swallowed hard. My voice when it came was barely a breath. You shouldn't be in here. He nodded. I know. And still he didn't leave. The silence wrapped around us like a second skin. There was a weight in his eyes. Not just desire, but worry, curiosity, concern, as if he could see through every layer of my fear. Every mask I had worn for the past 6 months. I didn't mean for you to see anything, I whispered. I didn't mean to look. He took a slow step forward. But I did. My breath caught. The air between us seemed to hum. I've been trying not to think about it, he said, the words trembling at the edges. Not to feel. Whatever it is, I've been feeling. But tonight, something's different. You're different. I looked away. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was afraid he might hear it. You think I haven't noticed how beautiful you look lately? He asked. How strong even when you're hurting. I squeezed my eyes shut.
Couldn't take it.
Not the way his words felt like a bomb and a flame at the same time. I'm your mother, I said, trying to steel myself. But the words rang hollow in the room. They were true, yes, but tonight they didn't explain everything. They did not erase the electricity hanging in the air. They didn't account for the way he looked at me. Not like a boy seeing his mother, but like a man seeing a woman. When I opened my eyes again, he was closer, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him.
I don't want to hurt you, he said.
Or make you feel ashamed. But you don't have to carry all this alone anymore. You don't have to be lonely. See you, all of you. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. Not just from the danger of the moment, but from the honesty in his voice, the tenderness. I turned my face, but he reached out gently, his fingers just brushing my hand. So soft, so deliberate. That single touch made my whole body tense. Not from fear, from recognition. I pulled my hand back. Still, he came closer. His eyes didn't hold judgment or pressure, just a quiet ache that mirrored my own. And then he said, barely more than a whisper, let's help each other. We're lonely. The words hovered in the air like a thread between us, fragile and pulsing. I felt them settle deep in my chest, echoing in places I'd kept shut for far too long. Lonely. It was the first time either of us had said it out loud. And maybe that's why it broke me. My heart squeezed. Not just from the shock of it, but from how honest it was. Not seductive, not manipulative, just real. The kind of real that you bury in silence because speaking it out loud feels like surrender. I don't know what we're doing, I whispered. I don't either, he said. But I know what it's like to feel invisible. I've seen that look in your eyes, Mom. The one I see in the mirror sometimes. I turned away, my shoulders trembling. I wanted to be strong, to be rational, to stop this tide before it pulled us into something we couldn't come back from. But instead, I felt my defenses cracking slowly like old glass under pressure. He sat beside me on the bed, not touching, not crowding, just close enough that I could feel his warmth. And we stayed there, both of us staring at the same spot on the wall, breathing the same uncertain air. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry everything alone, he said softly. Close my eyes. Neither should you, I murmured. And in that moment, without thought, without decision, I turned toward him. The space between us evaporated. Our faces were inches apart, our breath mingling in the dim light. I should have stopped. I didn't because the ache had been building for too long and the closeness of him, the safety of him became too much to resist. I leaned forward just enough to feel the whisper of his lips brush mine. And then I kissed him. Not deep, not hurried, just pressed my lips to his. A touch filled with years of silence, of longing, of loneliness that neither of us had ever put into words. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. When I finally opened my eyes, his hand was resting lightly on mine, and he was staring at me. Not with confusion, but with clarity. I pulled back, my breath shaky, the weight of what had just happened pressing against my chest.
We shouldn't have, I said.
I know, but neither of us moved. And in the silence that followed, there was no fear,